Texas in the SEC. How good will the play against the nation's best conference? Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Please like the video, share the videos out on social media, and subscribe. And, of course, leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think about what we have to say. Well, Texas has basically sucked for more than 10 years against what has typically been sometimes the worst conference among the Power Five, sometimes third, sometimes fourth. They have sucked. They have basically played just over 500 football for a long time. This has been going on a long time. So it's not about Texas recruiting, resources, money, facilities, brand, all of that. In play, they could be the very best in college football. However, they can't hire a decent coach. Is Steve Sarkisian the guy? Well, he has yet to prove that at 13-12 through 2 seasons at Texas. Let's see what the Longhorns have done both in the Big 12 and against the SEC since losing the BCS championship game against Alabama in 2009. The Longhorns have faced the SEC 8 times. Their last effort, despite being a loss, may be the most impressive, taking on Alabama, a team that did not make the college football playoff, but was probably one of the top 4 teams in the country anyway, finishing 11-2. And if you watched that game, you saw that Texas was every bit as good as Bama on that day in Austin in Week 2. Quinn Ewers was playing a remarkable first quarter. He got knocked out of the game. Hudson Card stepped in, and he played rather well despite hobbling on a bad ankle. Bama got some calls in that game, and Texas whiffed on a sack attempt that would have ended the game at midfield against Bryce Young. Bryce Young moved them into field goal range, and they kicked the game winner on the last play of the game, 20-19. All right, before that, Texas was completely manhandled and beaten up front against Arkansas the previous season, 40-21, an Arkansas team that finished at 9-4. LSU, Texas, this was a great football game in Austin. Sam Ehlinger matching Joe Burrow. Did we know at that time that Joe Burrow would become a legend and that LSU would be the 15-0 national champion? No, but Texas played a darn good football game, took LSU to the wire 45-38. In 2018, this is probably the high mark here when talking about a winning performance. Texas, Georgia. Georgia, one of the best teams in the nation, had Bama down by 2 touchdowns in the second half of the SEC championship game to go to the college football playoff. They blew that game, and there's all sorts of excuses coming out of SEC camps, and Georgia in particular, that the Bulldogs didn't want to be there. Too bad. They lost the game. Texas, 28-21 at the Sugar Bowl. And that concluded a Texas season in which the Longhorns defeated Oklahoma, played the Sooners down to the wire in a Big 12 championship game, 39-27. Game was still in doubt with 4 or 5 minutes left to play, then won the Sugar Bowl game, and Tom Herman concluded a 10-4 season, top 10 finish. Texas was back. Of course, they weren't. To 2017, Tom Herman's first big win, postseason, and of course, he went undefeated in the postseason. Texas over Mizzou in the Texas Bowl 33-16. 2014, Texas embarrassed by Arkansas and Brett Bielema 31-7 at the Texas Bowl. The 2013 games against Ole Miss were home and home, losing to the Rebels 44-23. And that Ole Miss team under Hugh Freeze finished at 8-5. But the Longhorns won the initial matchup with the Rebels 66-31. That Rebels team finished at 7-6. And again, these are all the Texas results against the SEC going back to the 2009 BCS championship game and all the controversy surrounding the exit and injury of one of the best quarterbacks in college football, Colt McCoy. Would Texas have won the game? We'll never know. Bama did win the game 37-21. It was close with about 5 minutes left to play at 24-21. Texas has lost 5 of 8 against the SEC since then. Whether it's Mack Brown in charge, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, now Steve Sarkisian, Texas can recruit with the SEC. They prove it year after year after year. It's about development. It's about scheme. It's about culture, environment. Texas fails on all the other fronts, but when it comes to recruiting, Texas is right there. Let's look at the last 5 classes. Steve Sarkisian's current 2023 commits stand number 3 in the country. The last 4 recruiting classes at 5, 15, 5, and 3. That certainly can rate with the SEC, especially considering what we could call the Texas A&M bump. Meaning when the Aggies joined the SEC, what did they finally do? They were able to securely take advantage of their position in the Lone Star State and start to grab more of the top-tier talent in Texas. Well, Texas already does that, but now they got that SEC logo and say, we're playing in the best conference. We're no longer playing Kansas State and Kansas and Iowa State every week. We're playing LSU. We're playing Georgia, Tennessee, and everybody else in the SEC. Come play for the Longhorns. We are the cream of the crop. As we mentioned off the top, Texas has been dismal against the Big 12, and the Big 12 has not been a powerhouse. Oklahoma has been the powerhouse, and then, of course, Oklahoma has largely failed on the national stage against the elite programs. Texas has challenged Oklahoma on the field. It's almost always a one-score game, and, of course, the Longhorns buried the Sooners 49-0 this past season. But against the Big 12, the likes of all the teams in the Big 12 that are they're competent, they're decent, they're strong programs. Oklahoma State, TCU, Kansas State. If we look over the course of the last 10-plus seasons, they regularly finish somewhere between the top 15 to the top 40 in the nation. But Texas has been marginal against decent opponents. This is the record for Texas in the last 10 seasons, 78-60. That's only winning 56% of their games. Only 56% winning percentage in the Big 12 at 56-44. A clean, nice, nifty 100 games played over the past 10 seasons, make it 11 seasons in Big 12 play. Again, 56-44. Texas against other Power 5 conferences. Their non-conference record during this time, even with Tom Herman going 4-0 in bowl games, Texas is only 8-16 in playing non-conference opponents. So if Texas does, over the next 10 seasons in the SEC, what they've done versus the Big 12 during our sample size of 11 seasons, this is what their record is going to be in the SEC. They are going to go 45-35 in the SEC. Consider the SEC plays 8 conference games each season, 5-3, a little bit less than 5-3 at 45-35, and also Texas 68-52 would be the record going forward against all opponents over the next 10 seasons. I'm going to adjust that because I am going to put a little bit of faith in Texas money and in having the SEC patch on their jersey going forward, that they're going to recruit even at a higher level, and Texas is finally going to find, whether it's Sark or somebody else, a competent coach to lead amazing, incredible, top-flight, elite talent. And therefore, 74-46 is the projection for the next 10 seasons in the regular season for Texas playing in the SEC. In SEC play, 47-33. So that's not quite a 5-3 record each season. 5-3, of course, would factor out to 50-30 over 10 seasons in the SEC. Granted, the SEC may go to a 9-game schedule, but we'll project based on what it is right now. 47-33 is our projection for Texas football over the next 10 seasons in the SEC. Texas should compete for SEC championships, but there is no way that they will at their current state. They're playing in a inferior conference compared to the SEC. Big 12 fans, don't be offended. Inferior compared to the SEC. And they've not competed for championships for the most part, aside from a championship game appearance in 2018 and a few bids like 2020. They could have made it to the Big 12 championship game, but they lost on a last-second field goal against Iowa State. But to make the SEC championship game is going to be a long, long climb and a difficult, daunting task for Sark and the Longhorns. But let's say they get to 2 to 3 SEC championship games in the next 10 years, and they get to a playoff multiple times, because the 12-team playoff means if you go 10-2 in the SEC, you're in the playoff. And possibly if the SEC continues to dominate in the next playoff format, like they have in the current 4-team playoff, these 9-3 SEC teams against those daunting schedules are going to get a nod. So Texas could go to 3 to 4 playoffs in the next 10 seasons, maybe more if they get their act together and play Texas football like they did in the 60s, 70s, and under Mac Brown. Those are our thoughts about Texas football projected to the SEC. Would love to get your thoughts below, right here at the Voice of College Football.